Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I hope you all are doing well wherever you are, wherever you are. I want to come to you all to talk about self love as the operating system for what you are building. Okay. You'll notice my background. I am in Denver, or excuse me, Colorado Springs, Colorado, supporting a friend giving a TEDx. And so, not my normal background. But I want you all to think about how self love can be an operating system for what you are building. When I think about self love, I believe it's the first line of business in your life. I believe within the spaces you claim, you occupy, the circles you spend time with, personal and professionally. If you're in a professional environment, cultures of wellness can be built that same way. They are self love being scaled. So think about self love being the first line of defense in your first line of business in your life. I used to think that self love came after I did a big launch, after I hit a certain revenue dollar, after I got another degree, after, and after that version of me who finally felt worthy of the dream I was reaching for. I learned the hard way that's not going to produce self-love because I have all of those things. And for a long time, this was several years ago, I didn't feel connected to myself. I didn't feel connected to myself internally or externally. And so when we think about self-love, it doesn't come after all of these things. That's not how it works. I believe the behaviors that we do to demonstrate, to practice, to engage in self loving activities, that is the leader of what we're building, of what we want to feel. So the feelings we get because of all those things is the gift that comes as a result of practicing self love behavior, self love activities, etc. When I think about business, you do not build a business, a team, you do not chase possibilities or even cause a disruption in your life without having some type of foundation of the love you have for yourself. Those things don't happen unless you actually practice, unless you practice building that business, unless you practice being a good leader for your team, unless you practice chasing those possibilities, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I think about self love, it is not a spa day. It makes me think of the whole notion of coping within the mental health world. People believe coping is nails, hair, massages, all of those things help, but coping is the practice and it's designed to sustain you. And so when I think about self love, I think about that as well. And so it is a pattern of choices that we can make quietly, but intentionally, that tells the deepest parts of you that you are no longer up for or like operating by negotiating what you need to feel seen, supported, and safe. This is the standard when we talk about self love. I always say many people wait for the feeling of self love to arrive, but many people struggle with putting in the work to feel and practice self love. And so, like I said, it's not a reward you get at the end of achievement. It is the pattern and practice of behaviors that comes first. When I think about self love, it is perhaps sleeping when my body is asking me to. It is because I don't believe rest is earned. It is eating nutritious things because I know what I put in my body is going to matter. So, therefore, I'm respecting my energy and not out of guilt. When I think about putting rest in my calendar, actually scheduling rest is the same, it has to carry the same weight as any important meeting I would have. That's self love to me. And so when I think about self love, it's refusing to explain myself to people that are committed to misunderstanding me because I refuse to accept things on my own behalf that I would have intervened if it was somebody else. That's self love to me. So I'm not accepting those things because if I would stand up and speak up for someone else, I have to be able to do that for myself. That's an act of self love. And so that's kind of how I conceptualize self love. It is the discipline of being on my side. Okay. Because at the end of the day, everybody might not like you. You might go to work, you might be in your family, you might be in your community. The other day I posted, what do people assume about you? So people may have all these assumptions about you, and people had a lot of interesting things. People assume they're stuck up, they're money hungry, they're mean, all of this. And it comes down to those people likely never even had a conversation with you. And so when I think about self love, regardless of what other people think and believe, especially when it's not backed by evidence, it is the discipline of being on my own side, challenging my own self, holding myself accountable. Okay. When we repeat certain behaviors and practice them long enough, your system just might start believing, like, "Ooh, you're treating me really well. This actually feels really good." So I always say, practice the behaviors that you want to see results from, not just in your business, within yourself. When you practice those behaviors, the warmth and all of that from self love and good self esteem, that stuff comes later, but the behaviors lead. And so you can take this whole notion of self-love in terms of what do you need to practice, and the results will come and apply to anything in your life, but it starts with self. I'm getting ready to do a workshop for leaders and business leaders, and it's called Leading Within, and it's exploring power dynamics, people, and the capacity we have to keep showing up to serve other people. And we're going to be exploring some of that. So, why am I considering self love as an operating system? Okay. One, I'm like in ideation mode. I'm in the middle of a launch of a speaking series for mental health professionals. Just got done doing a training to apply for this certification. So, but when I think about self love as an operating system, we have got to ask ourselves, how can self love be your operating system for everything you are building and for everyone you are leading? I know a lot of experiences have contributed to you perhaps not having a true connection with yourself. Perhaps you're not trusting yourself because of those experiences, whether they're traumatic, job loss, relationship ruptures, just change your body changing, whatever it is. I need you to ask yourself, how can self love be the operating system for everything you are building and everyone you are leading? Because as I alluded to a few seconds ago, self love is the practice of doing what's best for you when it's best for you without harming other people. Whether it's sleeping when you need to, eating nutritious meals when you can, putting rest on your calendar the same way as you would put a very important meeting to close a contract. That's self love. I know many of you are chasing dreams. I love it. Some of you are building things from scratch. Some of you are stepping on stages you could have never imagined. Some of you are maintaining friendships at your age. Maybe you're leading a team, a department, a company, whatever it is. And also, some of you may be in the middle of a disruption in your life, a role, a relationship, and a pattern that just no longer fits your life. When I think about self love, it's the quiet thing that's underneath all of that, the roller coaster, the good and the not so good. It is the thing that decides whether what you're building, will you keep holding on? Because when those things are happening, the roller coaster of good and not good, can you still love yourself at the end of the day? Even when you've made mistakes, can you reconcile with yourself? Okay. And so it's the thing that decides what you are building, will it hold up? And whether the people you are leading, will they trust the culture that you say you're creating? As a person that goes into organizations talking a lot about creating cultures of wellness where people are seen as souls and not statistics, can you actually say that at the end of the day and mean it? I've met a lot of people who do not love themselves because they cannot look in the mirror. They're doing the very opposite of what you have led people to believe. Okay. And so if you can't do that and still look in the mirror, that I call that performance. Your performance, and you got a whole show to keep up. That's when life and leadership really becomes a lot of pressure. It's almost like you're suffocating and you're just like, damn, I can't sleep. I don't want to go to work. I don't want to lead. I don't want to show up for my family. When you're not being honest about what's underneath all of that stuff, when you're not being honest about what's detracting from your ability to love yourself, not just like love yourself, that's punishment. I call it self punishment. And so that's why I think about self love as an operating system. It's a guide, it steers it. If self love is the operating system, I like to think everything else is like an app running on top of it. I told y'all I'm in ideation mode. And so it's just like, I got multiple things running in the background. But at the end of the day, I still need to go to bed. At the end of the day, I know I pray to God there'll be a tomorrow. At the end of the day, I have to look in the mirror and say what I am building. One, do I have the capacity, aka bandwidth? Or am I burning myself out for the sake of performing and not wanting to let people to see me A, B, C, and D? Okay. But when we don't disrupt that, that is self punishment. Totally contradicts self love. In a lot of my talks, I talk about core wounds and inner critics. So, a lot of the parts that are trying to protect us from the hard things and help us manage life, all of that stuff shows up. But if your operating system is at its capacity, we know, think about a computer, think about a car. My phone, I can't go live on one of the platforms because it says will proceed or something when it reaches a cooler state. So my phone is overheating, doing too much, scrolling too much. But that's what I mean when I say self love has to be your operating system for everything you are building and everyone you are leading. Okay. As a therapist, as well as an organizational speaker, trainer, consultant, I have had people say, if I focus too much on self love, that's taking too much time. I just want to keep going and see where the chips fall. Okay. But we say we want these things, but we don't practice the very thing that's going to be working in the background, quiet underneath when all else is going haywire. So many people think self love is going to show up. Remember, I said after the launch, after you hit a revenue goal, after the promotion, after another degree, the title, all the bells and whistles. After you got this engagement score, you can finally breathe. Many people are waiting for the achievement to deliver the self love. Okay. You're waiting for these things to deliver what you believe self love is. You thought if you built enough, you worked hard enough, you led enough, you served, performed, the love for yourself would finally land. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If you are that person that's building internally and externally, the dream cannot give you the self love that your life deserves. And so the behaviors that you need to do, you're refusing to do them. So you'll meet every goal. You're dope. You're awesome. You'll meet every benchmark, every goal, and still feel unsafe, even in your own life, if you don't do the work of practicing the behaviors that pour back into your love bucket, that fuel you, that stays, underneath the surface, no matter what life is throwing at you. Okay. So you'll meet all of those things because I see it in real time. But when I sit down and talk with people, there's an emptiness. And I can understand it. I have had people say, how can I be full or filled when there's so much chaos going on? The same way I believe about joy. Joy and horror can coexist. Self-love, if this is the conduit for everything we need to keep going, it can coexist. So we're waiting for the world to get better, y'all. We see it. We're waiting for the world to get better, waiting for these achievements to kick in and say, maybe I'll finally feel like it delivered self love. No. So for the leaders out there, When I talk about cultures of wellness, the culture you're trying to create cannot give your team what your own self love refuses to model. You're trying to create a culture externally, but you can't give your team what you can't give your team will actually show up when you are refusing to model self love. Your team, they're not waiting for another wellness email. Okay. They are watching how you treat yourself when nobody else is watching. That's why I say most people lead externally because all the successes and the metrics, the KPIs, all of that stuff looks great. But how do you lead from within? This is when I say what I mean when I say self love is a practice, and it's important that your self love can be feel and seen from the people you are leading. But I want to reframe. Let's reframe something. As I was talking about, self love is the behavior first, and then the feelings and stuff follow. Okay. The behavior is the leader in your life because it requires discipline, it requires practice, it requires committal. So if the behavior is the leader, the feeling is the gift that we get as a result. This is not a conversation about perfectionism, okay? Recovering perfectionists right here, okay? This is not that. It's not saying, oh, if you do everything right, every day is going to be great. Remember, those two are not the same. Self-love does not mean perfection. Self-love does not mean you will not be without stress and chaos and all of that. What it means is that if I keep practicing behaviors that pour into me, that fuel my self love bucket, the gifts I will get as a result gives me ammunition to keep going. And as I said, your ammunition is to keep your operating system going. I want you to think about that. Can you tie this directly into what you are building and who you are leading? The same self love, I believe, the same self love that runs your mornings, that runs your business, the same self love that puts rest on your calendar to run those meetings, the same self love that ends the tolerating of nonsense, can it run what you are building? It's the same self love. You just got to show up for you now. You do not have to wait for to feel worthy of self love. Okay. How many of you all have been taught, just humble yourself, be docile, show that you're worthy. That's great. But you don't have to wait to feel worthy of self love. You move, you practice, and you build. But it has to be in alignment with what you say, or more so, what you do. So when you're doing all this moving and the worthiness finally meets you with what you're doing, that's when we actually get to see self love and self trust starting to meet. Then you repeat it. You start making those quiet choices. They're not sacrifices, they're quiet choices of what it's going to take to fill that self love bucket. You start showing up for yourself even before the evidence rolls in. Even before you're like, okay, what is this going to do for me? You keep repeating things that fuel you back up. So when I think about what does self-love look like when you are building and when you are leading, okay? I'm gonna just go through a few of them because I've already talked about them. Now I'm gonna recap. Self-love sounds like the voice that you chose, okay? You notice the tone in your voice that's in your head. Is it denigrating or is it motivating? Okay. And you ask, whose voice is actually am I actually hearing right now? Is it that self-critical voice? Or is it the voice that fuels you? If you are pitching, you are selling, you are speaking, if you are just holding space for sisters or whoever, okay? Whatever you are doing, what voice did you inherit in your head? because your dreams cannot be built on someone else's standards, on someone else's voice. That's not self love. Okay. If you're a leader, the voice in your head becomes the voice of your culture. Okay. When that self love isn't there, the self talk that you're rah rah rah, it's starting to leak out. Okay. People don't really know what it is, but it's leaking out. Another example of what self-loves look like as you're building and leading, whether it's a team, a company, even your family. Self-love treats your body like it's infrastructure. When I hear infrastructure, it's like what I need to sustain, eating, sleeping, resting. Those are not rewards for being productive. They're actually the conditions. Okay. You don't get a reward because you did these things. You did them because they were the conditions you needed to maintain your infrastructure. And you all know I talk a lot about evolving mental capacity. Capacity is the bandwidth you have to navigate life, to keep going, do what you have to do. Capacity is an asset to maintaining your infrastructure. So when we think about self love, how that shows up personally or professionally, it protects it as though it's the security. Security, self love is the security of your infrastructure. So for leaders, if a team cannot trust that the wellness initiative that you put on, so say like they don't trust who you brought in, they don't trust that it's going to add value, they believe it's just a checkbox. So if your team cannot trust the wellness initiative that you announced, that your team announced, okay, that's not a demonstration of self-love because you did it just to do it and you didn't care what was the outcome. Okay. So I want you to keep that in mind. Can you respect that wellness initiative? Or excuse me, can you respect someone's need to care for themselves the same way you do a wellness initiative that has your name attached to it? When I think about self love stops over explaining. Earlier, I alluded to that I'm done explaining to people that's intentionally wanting to misunderstand me. So when self-love stops over explaining, we refuse to stop explaining ourselves to people that don't respect our standards and the rules that we're going to operate. The boundaries are what's going to happen internal because they're based on your values and the energy that to do certain things. Okay. Some people sign up for who you were before you started practicing self-love and they think they just go stay. No, they got to go. Okay. They did not consent to who you are becoming, so they got to go. They don't have to you don't need their permission. At that point, it becomes confusion because people are still treating you like a virgin who you used to be. So you're over explaining, trying to catch them up to board. No, they have to go. And for leaders, some of your peers and your stakeholders, they are benefiting from who you used to be. If you're a team member, they're benefiting from that. Okay. They're benefiting from the version of who you were when you had no or limited self love. So when you push back on that, that is data. That is data of what you need to do to keep going. Okay. When I think about self love, it uses that honest information. When you look at the connections, the conversations, and the circumstances, y'all know I love a good alliteration. When you look at the connections, the conversations, and the circumstances that you've been tolerating because leaving those people felt like it was like a referendum on your worth. A referendum on your worth. Okay. I like to believe that's necessary information. You just got to figure out what you're going to do with it. Okay. And the last thing I want to say, I was on a roll. I was on a roll when I was writing this. Self loves stop using your history against you. Okay. Where you started with your wellness journey, that's not a ceiling. It is not a ceiling. What you survived is not a forecast to your future. I want you to think about that. So, for leaders, perhaps the imposter loop that's going and going in you or your team members' heads is the absence of self love that's leaking into how you lead. Because you say you want to lead with confidence, you want productive team members, all of these things, but this imposter loop is starting to leak out. It shows up when you are micromanaging, when you are over explaining, when you are contradicting the very values that have kept your team alive, when you're over functioning, you're over proving, your team can feel that. That's why I say self-love stops. You have to stop using your history against you if you're going to embrace this notion of self-love being your container, your conduit, your catalyst. Okay. As I get ready to wrap up, I know a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, self love, it's so fluffy. I want you all to think about the grief of self love. This is the part a lot of people aren't really talking about. It's one of those ambiguous losses. When self love stops being, let's say, a quote, and it's you actually got to practice it, you start disrupting some things. You start disrupting patterns that you have had for a long time and you got to unlearn. People grieve those things. It was easier to be the old version of you or go back to the old version of you. You start grieving relationships that you can't take with you. You start grieving maybe where your income stream was because it was tied to if I make all this money, I'm gonna love myself. So therefore, when you finally start doing the healing work, you're like, I don't need to do all that to live a good life. You start grieving rooms you used to be in, roles you used to have, the habits that no longer fit your lifestyle or your body. Okay. If you're a leader or a team member, perhaps you start grieving what used to be normal on a team. Okay. As I said a few minutes ago, self love feels like discipline. When it feels like discipline, it can also feel like grief. When we think about the version of you that overfunction for approval, that wasn't practicing self love. You were trying to earn the right to exist. You built on it, you stood on it, but you got here for a reason. Okay. You got here for a reason. So you got to hold that reason as data. Self love means thanking yourself and letting yourself take a step back. You don't have to do the song and dance no more. Perhaps you don't have to hustle anymore. This is the real disruption of self love. Okay. That's the internal one. Self love requires a refined or new operating system because you got to honor the old one for what it served and it's time to retire it. It doesn't make sense anymore. That is where most people quit. That is where most people quit because it takes practice, it takes hard work. And so they confuse the grief of real self love for evidence that they're on the wrong path. Oh, all this stuff is broken. Well, one of the things I know, sometimes it takes things to break in order for you to start looking at things a little bit differently. When things are a little bit more abstract, you start seeing a different vision, a different version. Okay. So it's not that you're on the wrong path. It just means that grief of and what it's going to take to get back to or to redefine a core self-love, it has to take practice. And so, like I said, as I get ready to wrap up, when we think about when self-love finally lands, it is the feeling that comes after the behavior, after the repetition, after your systems within you finally start believing you were telling the truth the whole time. Okay. It's time to be on your own side. Dreams stop feeling like a referendum of whether you deserve love. The bills stop feeling like, oh, you got to get this proof. You got to keep proving yourself. When disruptions happen, people, places, things go, it's not a punishment. You're just like, makes sense. When you're a leader, your team stop performing and they actually start trusting you a little bit more because your imposter loop isn't oozing out. When we think about self love, it stopped being something that we're grasping, we're reaching, and we're striving for. And it's something that we operate from within. It's the pattern of our choices. Remember, they're made quietly and they can be made intentionally. And so, if you are somebody that's building, I want you to name one possibility you're reaching for. Then name one thing you're tolerating that is in the way of your self love. Then name one more thing, one quiet act of self love that you're willing to practice this week before the feelings show up. If you're a leader, I want you to name one thing that you've been tolerating on behalf of your team that you would intervene immediately if it was someone else. So name what you've been tolerating that's coming from you that you would have easily intervened if you had seen it show up in one of your loved ones. Then I want you to name the quiet act of self love you are willing to practice imperfectly this week so that the people you're called to lead can actually see who you are when you lean fully into yourself. Okay. If you're a mental health professional and you're like, okay, I want to do some more of this work. I want to do this work within me, but also, how do I do this work within organizations? I want to invite you all to join the Amplify Your Voice Spring into Speaking series. When I think about self love as a mental health professional, I cannot say I love myself when I'm burning the candles at both ends and I am not enjoying life. This is why I speak. This is why I help mental health professionals identify how to amplify their voice. Because when we amplify our voice, we make more impact in people's lives. We make income that feels aligned, not the hustle mentality. And we get to have more independence where we're not earning rest. We're not earning being able to eat a meal. We're not earning good self-talk. Those are inherent in us. So if you're interested, you can head to speaktothesoul.com/spring series. And I would love to have you in the room. But if you are a leader, I want you to truly consider how we can partner on some of the things I talked about, whether it's within you, within your team, or your full organization. Because I want you to consider how your environments are stepping on, or are they influencing someone's desire to love themselves enough where they get to show up and feel safe doing it? This can be through trust, this can be through power dynamics, or even psychological safety in the organization. So, I hope you all have a great day. Drop any questions or comments in the chat section, and I will see y'all.